Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel, where we dive into the most gripping, emotional, and controversial stories you can't stop thinking about. Today, we're exploring the dramatic unraveling of a seemingly perfect small-town marriage. Emily and Nathan's 12-year union faces the ultimate test when an emotional affair with an old flame shakes their foundation, and just when you think it couldn't get more complicated, Nathan's own secrets come to light. This story will have you questioning the boundaries of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. Stick around, because you won't want to miss this roller coaster of emotions. The summer of 2016 in Chestnut Grove felt like stepping into a painting of suburban perfection. The town was a quiet, picturesque place where white picket fences lined the streets, children rode their bikes in the late afternoon, and the hum of sprinklers was a familiar soundtrack. It was the kind of town where people smiled at one another at the grocery store and shared small talk about the weather. But, as everyone knows, appearances can be deceiving. This story revolves around three main players: Emily Hart, her husband, Nathan Hart, and an unexpected fourth figure who would later turn their seemingly perfect life upside down. Emily and Nathan were high school sweethearts. Their love story had all the makings of a classic rom-com. Nathan was the quarterback, Emily the aspiring artist, and their bond seemed unshakable. They had tied the knot in their mid-20s and built a life together in a charming two-story house with a red front door and an impeccably maintained garden. Emily, now 34, was the epitome of a small-town sweetheart. With her sun-kissed auburn hair and warm smile, she was the person everyone turned to for advice or a cup of sugar when they ran out. She had traded her dreams of becoming an artist for a stable job as a graphic designer at a local agency, a compromise she often told herself was for the best. Nathan, 36, was every bit the dependable husband. He worked as a manager at a regional bank, a job that came with its fair share of stress but allowed him to provide for their comfortable life. Standing at 6'2", with a broad, sturdy frame, Nathan exuded reliability, the kind of man who always carried jumper cables in his trunk, just in case. Their marriage, though, was at a crossroads. 12 years together, and while the love was still there, the spark had dimmed. Conversations had become more about who would take the trash out or what groceries were needed than dreams or shared laughter. Emily often found herself longing for something more, though she couldn't quite articulate what that more was. Nathan, too, felt the strain, but had convinced himself that this was just what long-term marriages looked like. The story begins on a sunny Wednesday morning. Emily stood in their pristine kitchen, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, a hand-painted ceramic piece she had made years ago. The room was bathed in golden light streaming through the bay window, and everything seemed calm. That's when her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen and saw a name she didn't immediately recognize: Andrew K. Curiosity piqued, she unlocked the phone. It was a message from an old college friend she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "Hey Emily, hope this isn't too out of the blue. I came across some of your art on an alumni page and was blown away. Are you still painting?" A rush of emotions flooded Emily. She hadn't touched a paintbrush in years. Life had gotten in the way. First work, then marriage, and then the slow, creeping inertia of everyday routines. But the message awakened something inside her. She replied, keeping it brief but friendly. "Hi Andrew, wow, it's been ages. Thanks for the kind words. I haven't painted in a while, but maybe I should pick it up again." What started as a casual exchange quickly became something more. Over the next few days, Emily and Andrew texted frequently. He was charming, attentive, and most importantly, interested in her, not just as a wife or an employee, but as Emily, the woman with dreams and passions she had almost forgotten. Nathan noticed the change, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Emily seemed lighter, more animated. She hummed while cooking dinner, laughed more easily at sitcoms they watched together, and spent more time on her phone. Nathan assumed it was just a phase, or that Emily had reconnected with an old friend, which she casually mentioned one evening. But things escalated. One Saturday afternoon, while Nathan was mowing the lawn, Emily found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she wore an old sweatshirt smeared with paint from years ago. Something about the image made her pause. She remembered a time when she would have dressed up just for fun, painted her nails in bold colors, and gone out to explore the world. Impulsively, she texted Andrew, "Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a life you didn't choose?" His reply came quickly, "Every day, but sometimes you have to create your own escape." Andrew suggested they meet up, just to catch up in person. Emily hesitated. On the surface, it seemed innocent enough, but deep down, she knew there was an undercurrent to their conversations that she wasn't entirely ready to face. Meanwhile, Nathan was dealing with his own challenges. Work had been relentless, with new targets and demanding clients pushing him to his limits. He had always prided himself on being the rock of their marriage, but lately, he felt like the foundation was beginning to crack. He noticed Emily pulling away, though she was careful not to let it show too much. The first real clue came one evening when Emily left her phone on the kitchen counter while stepping outside to take a call. Nathan glanced at the screen, something he never did, out of respect for her privacy. But the name, Andrew K., flashed across the top. His heart sank. When she returned, Nathan tried to play it cool. "Who was that?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Oh, just an old college friend," Emily replied, brushing it off. "He's in town and wanted to catch up." Nathan nodded, but the unease lingered. The next week, Emily met Andrew at a cafe downtown. It was a small, cozy spot with mismatched furniture and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Emily had dressed with more care than usual, wearing a flowy blouse and her favorite pair of earrings. When Andrew walked in, she almost didn't recognize him. The boyish charm from college had been replaced by a confident, polished demeanor. He smiled warmly, and for the first time in years, Emily felt seen. They talked for hours, reminiscing about old times and sharing stories about their current lives. Andrew was a photographer now, traveling the world and capturing breathtaking landscapes. His stories were filled with adventure and freedom, everything Emily felt her life was missing. When they parted ways, Andrew hugged her tightly. It was longer than a friendly embrace, and Emily's heart raced as she pulled away. Back at home, guilt began to creep in. Nathan was watching TV when she walked through the door, and she couldn't meet his eyes. The weight of her secret hung heavy in the air. Emily couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of Andrew, Nathan, and the fine line she felt she was dangerously close to crossing. Every fiber of her being told her this was more than just catching up with an old friend. It was a spark she hadn't felt in years. Nathan, lying beside her, stirred slightly. His face looked peaceful, almost childlike in his sleep, and for a moment, Emily felt a pang of guilt so sharp it nearly took her breath away. How had they gotten here? How had the man she once adored become a stranger? But the thought of Andrew lingered. His laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. It was intoxicating and dangerous. Over the next few weeks, Emily found herself walking a tightrope between her past and her present. She and Andrew began texting more frequently, their conversations growing bolder, more intimate. He sent her photos of his travels, sunsets over Paris, the snow-capped peaks of the Alps, and Emily couldn't help but imagine herself in those places, free and untethered. Nathan, oblivious to the full extent of what was happening, tried to bridge the growing gap between them. One Friday evening, he surprised Emily with a dinner reservation at their favorite Italian restaurant. He even brought home flowers, a sweet gesture that Emily might have cherished a few years ago. But as they sat across from each other at the candle-lit table, the conversation felt stilted. Nathan talked about work, the new client he was dealing with, and his plans for their annual summer barbecue. Emily nodded politely, but her thoughts kept drifting to Andrew. When Nathan reached for her hand, she flinched ever so slightly, a reaction that didn't go unnoticed. "You've been distant lately," Nathan said, his voice soft but laced with concern. Emily forced a smile. "Just work stress, that's all." Nathan didn't press further, but the worry in his eyes lingered. The next major shift came on a Saturday afternoon. Emily was supposed to be at the grocery store, but instead, she found herself in Andrew's downtown loft. The space was everything she imagined it would be: minimalist, filled with natural light, and adorned with his photography. There was a photo of the ocean at sunrise that particularly caught her eye. "I took that in Bali," Andrew said, standing behind her. His voice was warm, inviting. "It's beautiful," Emily replied, her fingers brushing the edge of the frame. "So are you," he said, his tone dropping to a whisper. Emily turned to face him, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had been both dreading and anticipating. The air between them was electric, charged with an unspoken understanding of what might happen next. But before either of them could move, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw Nathan's name on the screen. "Are you okay?" Nathan's text read. "You've been gone a while, just checking in." The message was a jolt back to reality. Emily stepped back, creating space between herself and Andrew. I should go," she stammered, clutching her purse. Andrew didn't argue, though the disappointment in his eyes was clear. "Think about what you really want, Emily," he said, as she headed for the door. The cracks in Emily and Nathan's marriage grew more pronounced. After that day, Emily became more withdrawn, her guilt manifesting in subtle ways, avoiding eye contact, snapping at small things, and spending more time out of the house under the guise of errands or work. Nathan, meanwhile, felt like he was grasping at straws to save their relationship. He planned a weekend getaway to the mountains, hoping a change of scenery might rekindle their bond. The trip was picturesque: the rolling hills, the crisp mountain air, the cozy cabin with a roaring fireplace. But no matter how hard Nathan tried, Emily remained distant. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nathan finally confronted her. "Emily, what's going on?" he asked, his voice heavy with frustration. "I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't know why." Emily hesitated, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to come clean and put it all out in the open. But the fear of destroying their marriage held her back. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just feel stuck." Nathan nodded slowly, his expression pained. "Then let me help you, Em. We can fix this together." But deep down, Emily wasn't sure if she wanted to be fixed. The final turning point came a few weeks later. Emily and Andrew had continued texting, though she had avoided seeing him in person since that day in his loft. But one text from him changed everything. "I need to see you," he wrote. "There's something I want to tell you in person." Emily's hands trembled as she read the message. She knew what this meant. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at a secluded park on the edge of town. The setting was almost too perfect: golden light filtering through the trees, the distant sound of birds chirping. Andrew was waiting for her by a bench, looking as confident and composed as ever. When she approached, he smiled. "I didn't think you'd come." "I probably shouldn't have," Emily admitted, sitting beside him. They talked for a while, but the conversation felt like a prelude to something more. Finally, Andrew leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Emily, I can't stop thinking about you," he said. "You don't have to keep pretending you deserve to be happy." His words hit her like a thunderclap. For months, she had been walking this fine line, telling herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. But deep down, she knew Andrew was right. She wasn't happy. As their eyes met, Emily felt herself leaning in, her heart racing with anticipation and dread. Emily didn't know how long she had been sitting there, staring into Andrew's eyes, teetering on the edge of a choice that felt impossible. The park, with its serene beauty, seemed like the worst place for such a morally fraught moment. Her mind screamed at her to pull away, to walk back to her car and leave this chapter of her life behind. But her heart, that aching, yearning part of her that had been buried for years, wasn't ready to let go. And then, it happened. Andrew leaned in first, closing the gap between them. His lips brushed hers in a way that was both tender and electrifying, sending a shiver down her spine. For a moment, Emily let herself fall into it. The warmth, the passion, the sheer thrill of something new. But as quickly as it began, she pulled away, her breath shaky and her heart pounding like a drum. "I can't," she whispered, standing up abruptly. Andrew rose too, concern etched across his face. "Emily, I'm not trying to hurt you, She cut him off, her voice trembling. "This isn't right, I shouldn't be here." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her steps hurried and unsteady. The drive home was a blur. Emily's thoughts raced, a chaotic mess of guilt, longing, and confusion. She had crossed a line. There was no denying that now, but the worst part was that some small part of her didn't regret it. Back at home, Nathan was waiting for her. He sat on the living room couch, his face a mask of quiet concern. "You've been gone a lot lately," he said, his voice calm but probing. "Are you okay, Emily? Is there something you need to tell me?" Emily froze, her heart pounding. She had prepared 100 excuses in her head, but under Nathan's steady gaze, they all fell apart. I just needed some time to myself," she said finally, avoiding his eyes. Nathan nodded slowly, but the doubt in his expression was unmistakable. "You know, if something's wrong, we can work through it together, but you have to let me in." The sincerity in his words made Emily's chest tighten. Nathan wasn't perfect, but he loved her in a way that was steady and unconditional, a love she had taken for granted. "I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "I promise." But Nathan wasn't convinced. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. And so, for the first time in their marriage, he did something he never thought he would. He checked her phone. What he found made his blood run cold. The messages from Andrew were incriminating enough: flirty texts, inside jokes, and one that stood out like a dagger to the heart. "Today was incredible. I haven't felt this alive in years. When can I see you again?" Nathan's hands trembled as he set the phone down. The reality of it hit him like a freight train. Emily was having an emotional affair, if not more. The next morning, Nathan didn't wait for Emily to wake up before he confronted her. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom, holding her phone in his hand. "Who is Andrew?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with a sharp edge. Emily sat up, her heart sinking. "Nathan, I can explain." "Explain what?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "That you've been lying to me, sneaking around with some guy behind my back. God, Emily, how could you?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking. I was lonely, Nathan." "Lonely?" Nathan repeated, his tone incredulous. "So you decide to throw away 12 years of marriage for what, a fling?" "It wasn't a fling," Emily said quietly. Her words only fueled Nathan's anger. "Then what was it, Emily? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been shopping around for a replacement while I've been here, working my ass off to provide for us." "It wasn't like that," she cried, standing up. "I didn't plan for this, Nathan. It just happened." "That's not an excuse," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "Do you even understand what you've done to me, to us?" The room fell silent, the weight of Nathan's words hanging heavily in the air. For the first time, Emily truly saw the pain in his eyes, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and it shattered her. In the days that followed, the tension between Emily and Nathan was palpable. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was strained and stilted. Nathan threw himself into work, leaving early and coming home late. Emily, meanwhile, found herself retreating into her own world, unsure of how to fix the mess she had created. Andrew, unaware of the chaos he had helped ignite, sent Emily another message. "I can't stop thinking about you. Please let me see you one more time." Emily stared at the message for what felt like hours. She knew she should delete it, block his number, and focus on salvaging what was left of her marriage, but some part of her couldn't let go. Against her better judgment, she replied, "Not now, I need time." It wasn't a no, and she hated herself for it. Nathan, still reeling from the discovery of Emily's affair, decided to take matters into his own hands one evening. While Emily was out, he did something he never thought he would. He called Andrew. The conversation was short and direct. "Stay away from my wife," Nathan said, his voice cold and firm. Andrew, caught off guard, stammered out a response. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "You didn't just cause trouble," Nathan snapped. "You tore my life apart, so do us both a favor and leave her alone." Andrew didn't argue, but the damage was already done. When Emily returned home that night, Nathan was waiting for her. "I called him," Nathan said, his tone even. Emily's eyes widened. "You what?" "I called Andrew," he repeated. "And I told him to stay away from you." Emily's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You had no right." "No right?" Nathan interrupted, his voice rising. "I'm your husband, Emily. If anyone has a right to fight for this marriage, it's me." The argument that followed was explosive, bringing all their buried grievances to the surface. "You don't even see me anymore, Nathan," Emily shouted. "You're so focused on work and responsibilities that you've forgotten how to love me." "And you think Andrew loves you?" Nathan shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "He doesn't know you, Emily. Not the way I do." The fight ended with Nathan storming out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Nathan spent the night at a hotel, giving himself time to cool off and think. When he returned the next morning, he found Emily sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly. Nathan hesitated, his heart aching. "Then why did you do it?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "I was searching for something, but I didn't realize what I had until I almost lost it." For the first time in weeks, they sat down and talked. Really talked about their marriage, their fears, and their hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, and it didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Nathan sat in his parked car just a few blocks from home, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The morning after his emotional conversation with Emily, he found himself at a crossroads. Part of him wanted to believe her words, to trust that she truly wanted to fix their marriage. But another part, a louder, angrier part, couldn't ignore the pain of her betrayal. The radio played softly in the background, a slow, melancholic tune that only amplified his turmoil. With a deep breath, he turned off the engine and stepped out into the crisp morning air. This wasn't going to be easy, but he was determined to face it head-on. When Nathan walked through the front door, he found Emily in the kitchen, sipping coffee and staring out the window. She looked up when she heard him enter, her expression wary, but hopeful. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," Nathan replied, his voice measured. They stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between them like a canyon. Finally, Nathan spoke. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone steady but firm. "About us. About everything." Emily's grip tightened around her mug, bracing herself for what was coming next. "I'm willing to try," Nathan said, surprising even himself. "But there's one condition." Emily nodded quickly, eager to grab onto the lifeline he was offering. "Anything." "You need to cut all ties with Andrew," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "No more texts, no more meetings, no more anything. If we're going to rebuild this, I need to know that you're all in." Emily hesitated, her mind flashing back to Andrew's smile, his laugh, the way he made her feel. But she knew Nathan was right. If she wanted to save their marriage, she had to let Andrew go. "You're right," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I'll end it." Nathan nodded, though the doubt lingered in his expression. "Then let's take it one step at a time." Later that day, Emily sat alone in her car outside Andrew's loft, her hands trembling as she composed a message. "We can't do this anymore," she typed, her heart heavy with every word. "I need to focus on my marriage. Please don't contact me again." She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. The second it was done, a wave of emotion crashed over her: relief, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. Andrew replied almost instantly, "I understand. I hope you find what you're looking for." The simplicity of his response felt like a knife to the heart. Emily sat there for a while, letting the tears come. She had made her choice, but the weight of it was almost unbearable. For the next few weeks, Nathan and Emily worked hard to rebuild what had been broken. They went to couples therapy, where they confronted the underlying issues that had driven them apart. Emily admitted to feeling neglected, while Nathan acknowledged that he had been so focused on providing stability that he had forgotten to nurture their relationship. It wasn't easy. The sessions were raw and emotional, forcing them to confront truths they had both been avoiding. But slowly, they began to find common ground. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching an old movie, Nathan reached for Emily's hand. She looked at him, surprised, and he smiled. A small, tentative gesture that spoke volumes. "We'll get there," he said softly. Emily nodded, squeezing his hand. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Just as things seemed to be settling into a fragile peace, Andrew re-entered their lives in the most unexpected way. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Nathan was at work, and Emily was sorting through old boxes in the attic, trying to declutter. Her phone buzzed on the nearby table, and she glanced at the screen, expecting it to be a spam call or a notification from the local news app. But it wasn't. It was Andrew. Emily's heart sank as she stared at the screen. She had blocked his number weeks ago, but somehow he had found a way to reach her. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Andrew," she said, her voice tense. "Emily, I know I shouldn't be calling," he said quickly, his tone urgent. "But there's something I need to tell you." Her chest tightened. "What is it?" "It's about Nathan," Andrew said, his words sending a chill down her spine. Andrew's voice was calm but firm as he explained what he had discovered. "I didn't mean to get involved, but I did some digging after our last conversation," he began, "and I found out that Nathan has been hiding something from you." Emily's stomach churned. "What are you talking about?" "There's a woman," Andrew said, hesitating slightly. "Her name is Lisa. I don't know the details, but they've been exchanging messages. It's not just work-related." Emily felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Andrew replied. Emily ended the call without another word, her mind racing. Could it be true Nathan, the man who had always been her rock, was hiding something from her? When Nathan came home that evening, Emily was waiting for him in the living room. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Who is Lisa?" she asked, her voice cold and direct. Nathan froze, his face draining of color. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Nathan," Emily said, standing up. "I know about the messages." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" she demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been keeping secrets of your own." Nathan hesitated, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Lisa is an old friend," he admitted. "We reconnected a few months ago, but I swear it wasn't anything more than that." "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily asked, her voice breaking. "Because I didn't want to give you another reason to doubt me," Nathan said quietly. "Especially after everything that happened." Emily's mind reeled. The betrayal she had felt just hours ago began to morph into something more complex. Hurt, yes, but also a deep sense of irony. They had both been guilty, in their own ways, of seeking something outside their marriage. That night, Nathan and Emily sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the weight of their mutual confessions hanging between them. "I don't know where we go from here," Emily said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," Nathan admitted. But despite the uncertainty, there was a strange sense of understanding in the room. For the first time in months, they saw each other not as adversaries, but as two flawed, vulnerable people trying to navigate an impossible situation. Nathan reached for Emily's hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't want to lose you," he said. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to lose you either." The following days were a blur of raw emotion and tense silence. Emily and Nathan lived under the same roof, but their once comfortable routines now felt like a minefield. Every glance carried a weight, every word seemed to carry an undercurrent of unspoken questions. Emily couldn't shake the revelation about Lisa. Nathan had sworn it was innocent, but the very fact that he had kept it from her was enough to sow seeds of doubt. For his part, Nathan wrestled with the fact that he had hurt Emily while trying to protect their fragile reconciliation. Their marriage felt like it was teetering on a knife's edge, and neither of them was sure which way it would fall. One Friday evening, Emily returned home to find Nathan sitting in the living room, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the table in front of him. The gesture caught her off guard. It felt almost normal, like something they might have done years ago. "I thought we could talk," Nathan said, gesturing for her to sit. Emily hesitated, but eventually took the seat across from him. Nathan poured them both a glass, the sound of liquid filling the silence between them. "I've been thinking a lot," Nathan began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "About us, about everything that's happened, and I realized I'm tired of living like this." Emily nodded slowly, unsure of where he was going. "I don't mean us," Nathan clarified quickly. "I mean the lies, the hiding, the constant second-guessing. It's exhausting, Emily. And I know I've contributed to it too." His admission took Emily by surprise. For weeks, she had been bracing herself for another confrontation, but Nathan's tone was calm, almost resigned. "I don't want to live in a marriage where we're always looking over our shoulders," he continued. "But I also don't know how to move forward if we can't trust each other." Emily's heart ached at his words. She reached for her glass, taking a sip to steady herself before replying. "I want to rebuild that trust," she said quietly. "But I don't know how either." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe we start by being completely honest. No more secrets, no matter how small." Emily hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. "Okay," she said finally. "No more secrets." For the first time in weeks, there was a faint glimmer of hope between them. Just as things seemed to be stabilizing, another unexpected twist threatened to derail everything. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Emily was in the kitchen, flipping through an old recipe book, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking when she saw Andrew's name. Despite her promise to Nathan, she hadn't blocked his number after their last conversation, and now, here he was again, threatening to upend the fragile progress she and Nathan had made. The message was simple but loaded. "I need to see you. It's important." Emily stared at the text, her mind racing. She knew she should ignore it, delete it, and move on. But something about the tone of the message made her pause. What could be so important that Andrew would reach out again, knowing the risk? Against her better judgment, she replied, "What is it?" Andrew's response came quickly. "Meet me at the cafe downtown. I promise this will be the last time." Emily wrestled with the decision for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she grabbed her coat and left, telling herself this would truly be the last time. When Emily walked into the cafe, Andrew was already there, seated at a corner table. He looked different, less confident, more troubled. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "Make this quick," Emily replied, her tone guarded. Andrew hesitated before speaking. "I wanted to apologize," he began. "For everything. For pushing you, for complicating your life. I never meant to cause so much trouble." Emily frowned, unsure of what to make of his sudden change in demeanor. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I realized I was being selfish," Andrew admitted. "I was chasing something that wasn't mine to have, and I needed to tell you that before I let you go." His words caught Emily off guard. For weeks, she had been bracing herself for another plea, another attempt to pull her back into his orbit. But this was unexpected. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice soft. "But I think it's best if we don't see or speak to each other again." Andrew nodded, his expression somber. "I know, take care of yourself, Emily." As she walked out of the cafe, Emily felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. For the first time in months, she truly felt like she was closing the door on that chapter of her life. That evening, Emily returned home to find Nathan in the living room, holding a small box she didn't recognize. "What's that?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Nathan hesitated before handing it to her. "I found it in the attic," he said. "It's from when we first moved in." Emily opened the box to find an assortment of old photos, letters, and mementos from the early days of their relationship. There were ticket stubs from their first date, a postcard from their honeymoon, and a faded Polaroid of them laughing at a backyard barbecue. "I thought we could look through it together," Nathan said, his voice soft. Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she sat down beside him. For hours, they sifted through the memories, laughing at old inside jokes and reminiscing about the life they had built together. It was a reminder of everything they had fought for, everything they still had to lose. The turning point came a few days later. Nathan and Emily were at their therapist's office, delving into the most painful parts of their story. "I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again," Nathan admitted, his voice cracking. "But I want to try because despite everything, I still love you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too," she said, her voice trembling. "And I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." Their therapist nodded, offering a small smile. "Rebuilding trust takes time," she said. "But it's clear that you both want this, and that's a good place to start." For the first time in months, Emily and Nathan left the session feeling hopeful. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a step in the right direction. The following weeks were a balancing act for Emily and Nathan as they navigated the delicate process of rebuilding their relationship. They had established a tentative rhythm: therapy sessions on Wednesdays, dinner together at least 3 times a week, and a shared commitment to be more open with each other. But beneath the surface, tension still simmered. Every small disagreement felt amplified, every lingering glance or hesitant word a potential trigger for old wounds. The stakes had never been higher, and both of them knew it. The next major challenge came in the form of a family dinner at Emily's parents' house. It was their first time seeing extended family since everything had unraveled, and Emily was dreading the inevitable questions about why she and Nathan had been so distant lately. As they pulled into the driveway, Nathan reached over and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We'll get through this together," he said, his voice steady. Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks." Inside, the house was buzzing with the usual chaos of a family gathering. Kids running around, the smell of roast chicken wafting through the air, and Emily's mother fussing over the centerpiece on the dining table. "Emily, Nathan!" her mother exclaimed, pulling them both into a warm embrace. "It's so good to see you two." For the first hour, things went smoothly. Emily and Nathan managed to avoid any probing questions, focusing instead on catching up with her siblings and helping set the table. But during dinner, Emily's father brought up a touchy subject. "So how are things between you two?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes keenly observant. Emily froze, her fork hovering mid-air. Nathan, to his credit, answered smoothly. "We've had our ups and downs, but we're working through it." Her father nodded, seemingly satisfied, but Emily felt her chest tighten. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the full truth, and as the conversation shifted to lighter topics, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still walking on a razor's edge. Although Andrew was no longer physically present in Emily's life, his shadow still lingered. She hadn't heard from him since their final meeting at the cafe, but the memories of their connection refused to fade. One evening, as Emily scrolled through old photos on her phone, she stumbled upon a picture Andrew had sent her months ago, a breathtaking sunset over the mountains, with a simple caption, "Wish you were here." Her chest tightened as she stared at the image. For a fleeting moment, she wondered what might have been if things had turned out differently, but then she shook her head, forcing herself to delete the photo. "This isn't who I want to be," she whispered to herself. Nathan, noticing her quiet mood, walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everything okay?" he asked. Emily nodded, offering a small smile. "Yeah, just reminiscing." While Emily struggled with her lingering feelings for Andrew, Nathan was fighting his own internal battle. He had been trying to put on a brave face, to convince himself that their marriage could survive this. But the weight of betrayal and doubt was beginning to take its toll. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, Nathan found himself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. The smiles on their younger selves seemed almost mocking now, a cruel reminder of how much had changed. Before he knew it, he was dialing his best friend, Mike. "I don't know if I can do this," Nathan admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Mike, who had been Nathan's confidant through thick and thin, didn't mince words. "It's okay to feel that way," he said, "but you have to decide if this marriage is worth fighting for. No one else can make that choice for you." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I want to believe it is, but some days, I don't know if I'm strong enough." "Then take it one day at a time," Mike advised. "You don't have to have all the answers right now." Just when it seemed like things couldn't get more complicated, a bombshell revelation shook everything to its core. It happened during a therapy session. Emily and Nathan had been discussing the progress they'd made when the therapist posed a simple but loaded question. "Is there anything either of you hasn't said yet? Something that might be holding you back?" Nathan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "No," he said finally. His tone clipped. Emily, however, felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had been holding on to one final secret, one she had convinced herself wasn't worth mentioning. But now, with the therapist's question hanging in the air, she couldn't keep it buried any longer. "There's something I need to say," she began, her voice trembling. Nathan looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I met with Andrew a few weeks ago," Emily admitted, her words spilling out in a rush. "It was the last time, and I told him it was over, but I should have told you sooner." Nathan's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Why didn't you?" "I was scared," Emily said, tears welling up. "I didn't want to ruin the progress we were making, but I realize now that keeping it from you was just as damaging." Nathan sat back, his arms crossed. "Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? After everything, you still went to see him?" Emily nodded, her tears spilling over. "I'm sorry, Nathan, I really am. It was a mistake, and I've regretted it every day since." The room fell into a tense silence, the weight of Emily's confession hanging between them. That evening, back at home, Nathan and Emily had the most heated argument of their marriage. "I've been trying, Emily," Nathan said, his voice rising. "I've been bending over backward to make this work, and now you're telling me you couldn't even give me the truth?" "I was scared of losing you," Emily shouted back. "Don't you think I've been trying too? Do you have any idea how much I hate myself for what I've done?" "Then why do you keep making the same mistakes?" Nathan shot back, his voice cracking with emotion. Emily froze, his words cutting her to the core. For the first time, she realized just how much pain she had caused, not just to Nathan, but to herself. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to figure it out. I want to be better, for you, for us." Nathan stared at her, his expression a mix of anger and exhaustion. Finally, he spoke. "I need time," he said quietly. "I can't keep doing this right now." In the days that followed, Nathan moved out of the house, staying with Mike while he sorted through his feelings. For both him and Emily, the separation was agonizing but necessary. Emily threw herself into therapy, determined to confront the deeper issues that had led her down this path. She began journaling, painting again, and focusing on rediscovering the parts of herself she had lost over the years. Nathan, meanwhile, spent his time reflecting on what he truly wanted. He spoke to friends, sought advice from a mentor, and even started reading self-help books on forgiveness and trust. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, Emily and Nathan began to rebuild their relationship from a distance. They exchanged occasional texts and phone calls, each conversation filled with both hesitation and hope. One evening, Nathan called Emily with a surprising proposal. "I think we should meet," he said. Emily's heart raced. "When?" "Tomorrow," Nathan replied. "There's something I need to say." The cafe was quieter than Emily had expected, the soft hum of conversation blending with the clinking of cups and the hiss of the espresso machine. She sat at a corner table, her fingers nervously tapping against her cup. The weight of Nathan's words from the previous night hung heavy in her chest. "I think we should meet. There's something I need to say." She hadn't slept much after that call, her mind replaying every moment of their relationship, from the early days of effortless love to the mess they were now trying to untangle. When Nathan finally walked in, her heart skipped a beat. He looked tired but resolute, his shoulders squared as he made his way to her table. "Hey," he said, his voice steady. "Hey," Emily replied, her tone softer. Nathan sat down across from her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them stretching like a taut wire. Then Nathan leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice calm but firm. "About us, about everything we've been through." Emily nodded, bracing herself for what was coming next. "I realized something," Nathan continued. "I've been so focused on what went wrong, on the betrayal, the lies, that I forgot to ask myself the most important question." "What's that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do I still love you?" Nathan said, his eyes locking onto hers. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to respond, to tell him she still loved him more than anything, but she was too afraid of what he might say next. "And the answer," Nathan said, his voice breaking slightly, "is yes, I do. I love you, Emily. Despite everything, I still want to fight for us." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as a wave of relief and guilt washed over her. "I love you too," she said, her voice trembling. "And I'll do whatever it takes to make this work." Nathan leaned back, his expression softening but still serious. "If we're going to move forward, we need to do it right this time. No more half measures, no more secrets." Emily nodded quickly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I promise." But Nathan wasn't done. "There's one more thing," he said, his tone firm. "We need a fresh start somewhere new, away from all the reminders of what happened." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean, leave Chestnut Grove?" "Yes," Nathan said. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I think it's the only way we can really move on." Emily hesitated, the thought of leaving the town she had called home for so long, filling her with a mix of fear and excitement. But as she looked into Nathan's eyes, she knew he was right. "Okay," she said finally, "let's do it." The decision to leave Chestnut Grove set off a whirlwind of activity. Emily and Nathan spent the next few weeks packing up their lives, saying goodbye to friends and family, and tying up loose ends. Their parents were understandably shocked by the news, but they offered their support, recognizing the importance of this new chapter in their lives. One of the hardest goodbyes came when Emily met Marissa, her childhood best friend, for coffee. "You're really leaving?" Marissa asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Emily nodded, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "It's what we need," she said. Marissa reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "I'll miss you, but I'm proud of you for fighting for your marriage." As moving day approached, the tension between Emily and Nathan began to ease. They found themselves laughing together again, sharing quiet moments that reminded them of why they had fallen in love in the first place. But the process wasn't without its challenges. Packing up the house unearthed painful memories, old anniversary cards, photos from happier times, and even a gift Nathan had bought for Emily during her emotional affair with Andrew. "Do you want to keep this?" Nathan asked, holding up the unopened box. Emily hesitated before shaking her head. "No," she said firmly. "It's part of the past, and that's where it belongs." Nathan nodded, setting the box aside without another word. The day they left Chestnut Grove was bittersweet as they loaded the last box into the moving truck. Emily took one final look at their house, the place where they had built a life together, where they had loved and fought and grown. "Ready?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle. Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The drive to their new home was long but filled with a sense of possibility. They talked about their plans for the future, from decorating the new house to exploring their new town. For the first time in months, the road ahead didn't feel so daunting. Their new home was a modest but charming cottage on the edge of a small, picturesque town. It wasn't as polished as their old house, but it felt like a blank canvas, a place where they could start over. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nathan turned to Emily, his expression serious. "We've been through so much," he said, "but I feel like we're finally moving in the right direction." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I feel the same way." Nathan reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to fight for us every single day." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she leaned into him, their foreheads touching. "Me too," she whispered. Settling into their new home brought a mix of challenges and opportunities for Emily and Nathan. The unfamiliar streets, new routines, and quiet evenings, without the familiar sounds of their old neighborhood, felt like stepping into another world, but it also gave them space to breathe, away from the ghosts of their past. Emily took up painting again, transforming one of the spare rooms into a studio. Nathan spent his mornings jogging through the nearby woods, finding solace in the rhythm of his steps and the serenity of nature. These small personal endeavors became a crucial part of their healing process, an unspoken understanding that while they were rebuilding their marriage, they also needed to rebuild themselves. A month into their new life, Nathan came home one evening with unexpected news. "My old boss reached out," he said, setting his briefcase down. "There's a position open back in Chestnut Grove. They're offering me a significant pay bump." Emily froze mid-step, her heart sinking. "Back in Chestnut Grove?" she repeated, her voice tinged with panic. Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I haven't decided anything yet, but it's tempting." The tension in the room was palpable. For weeks, they had worked hard to move forward, and the thought of returning to the place where everything had fallen apart felt like taking a step back. "What do you want to do?" Emily asked, forcing herself to stay calm. "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "Part of me thinks it could be a chance to prove that we've moved on, but another part isn't so sure." That night, they sat on the porch, talking for hours. They discussed their fears, their hopes, and what they wanted for the future. In the end, they decided together. The job offer would have to wait for now. Their focus was on building a stronger foundation, and that meant staying right where they were. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that decision, but just when Emily thought they had finally found their footing, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and Emily was in her studio, working on a new painting, when the doorbell rang. Nathan was out running errands, so she wiped her hands on a rag and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was a woman Emily didn't recognize. She was tall, with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. "Can I help you?" Emily asked, her brow furrowed. The woman smiled faintly. "You're Emily, right, Nathan's wife?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, and you are?" "My name is Lisa," the woman said, her voice calm. Time seemed to stop. Emily's mind raced, the name sending a jolt of adrenaline through her system. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked, her voice shaking slightly. Lisa's expression softened. "I think we need to talk." Emily invited Lisa inside, her hands trembling as she poured them both a cup of tea. They sat at the kitchen table, the silence between them heavy with unspoken tension. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Lisa began, her tone measured. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." Emily's stomach churned. "What truth?" Lisa took a deep breath. "Nathan and I worked together for years. We were close, but it was never more than that. He confided in me during a really difficult time in his life, when things between you two were at their worst." Emily's chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I care about him," Lisa said simply. "And I want you to understand that while nothing inappropriate ever happened, the emotional connection we shared was real. But he chose you, Emily. He always chose you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as Lisa's words sank in. She had spent so much time resenting the idea of Lisa, imagining her as a threat to their marriage. But now, faced with the truth, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For Lisa's honesty, and for Nathan's unwavering commitment. "Thank you for telling me," Emily said quietly. Lisa nodded, standing up to leave. "Take care of him," she said, before walking out the door. When Nathan returned home that evening, Emily told him everything. "She came here?" he asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Emily nodded. "She told me about your connection, about how much you were struggling." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I didn't think it would help." "It does," Emily said, surprising him. "Because it shows me how much you've been through and how much you fought for us, even when I didn't see it." Nathan looked at her, his expression softening. "You're the only person I ever wanted, Emily. I need you to know that." "I do," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I'm sorry for ever doubting it." Their reconciliation was put to the ultimate test a few weeks later, when Nathan received devastating news. His father had passed away. The loss hit Nathan hard, reopening old wounds and threatening to undo all the progress he and Emily had made for days. He withdrew into himself, barely speaking or eating. Emily, determined to support him, stayed by his side, offering quiet comfort. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Nathan finally broke down. "I don't know how to do this without him," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You don't have to," Emily replied, taking his hand. "We'll get through this together." Her words were a lifeline, pulling Nathan back from the brink. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to lean on her, to let her share the weight of his grief. The turning point came during the funeral. As Nathan delivered a heartfelt eulogy, Emily watched from the pews, her heart swelling with pride and love. In that moment, she realized just how far they had come, how much they had endured, and how much stronger they had become because of it. After the service, as they stood by Nathan's father's gravesite, he turned to Emily and took her hand. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied, her voice steady. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by loss and love, they made an unspoken promise to each other. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The weeks following Nathan's father's funeral were quiet, but filled with a profound sense of healing. For the first time in years, Emily and Nathan felt truly in sync. They leaned on each other, their shared grief becoming a catalyst for deeper connection. Emily's painting became a source of solace for both of them. Nathan would often sit in her studio, watching as she brought canvases to life with vibrant colors and bold strokes. It reminded him of the woman he had fallen in love with, passionate, creative, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Emily finished a piece inspired by the sunsets they often watched together, Nathan surprised her with an unexpected gesture. "I spoke to a gallery downtown," he said, holding up a business card. "They're interested in showcasing your work." Emily's eyes widened. "Nathan, you didn't have to—" "I wanted to," he interrupted, smiling. "Your art deserves to be seen." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Their new home became a symbol of their fresh start. They filled it with laughter, love, and new traditions. Weekly movie nights, long walks in the woods, and impromptu dance parties in the living room. But they also worked hard to maintain the trust they had rebuilt. Therapy remained a cornerstone of their relationship, helping them navigate lingering insecurities and fears. One evening, during a particularly candid session, Nathan shared something that had been weighing on him. "I used to think that love meant never making mistakes," he admitted, "but I've learned that it's about how you come back from those mistakes, how you choose to show up, even when it's hard." Emily reached for his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And you've shown up every single day," she said softly. Months later, Emily received a letter from Andrew. It was unexpected, but not unwelcome, a quiet acknowledgement of the role he had played in her journey. In the letter, Andrew apologized for his part in the turmoil, but he also thanked her for helping him see things more clearly. He had moved to a different city, started a new job, and was working on himself in ways he never had before. Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. 1 year after their move, Emily's first gallery showing was a resounding success. The room buzzed with excitement as visitors admired her work, many of them unaware of the deeply personal stories behind each piece. Nathan stood by her side throughout the evening, beaming with pride. When the gallery owner announced that one of her paintings had sold for a significant sum, Nathan pulled her into a tight embrace. "You did it," he whispered. "No," Emily replied, smiling through tears. "We did it." The story ends where it began, with Emily and Nathan sitting on their porch, watching the sunset. The sky was a kaleidoscope of colors, a fitting backdrop for the piece they had finally found. Nathan reached for Emily's hand, their fingers intertwining. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Sometimes, but not in the way I used to. It's part of who we are, but it doesn't define us anymore." Nathan smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I like that." As the sun dipped below the trees, Emily leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, their hearts full and their future bright. For Emily and Nathan, the journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And there you have it, a story of love, loss, and the hard-earned road to redemption. Emily and Nathan's journey reminds us that even the strongest relationships can face storms, but with enough effort and heart, they can weather them and come out stronger on the other side. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support helps me bring more compelling recaps like this to life, and let me know in the comments. What did you think of Emily and Nathan's journey? Could you forgive in their situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts.